This is Canine versus Bloodline on the breadline. Piece painted in 2008, and 12 years ago it was pretty much a response to the intervention, the Howard intervention on the Northern Territory. And so it's pretty self-explanatory in that it's that little Anangu lad there spearing the police dog, and the metaphor is giving the police back their own medicine. So he's got his spear thrower, he's out there in the country and launched that medicine, and you can see encrypted into the syringe there is "Justice Now," and when a little closer to the dog itself, the eye has a swastika in the eye. So it's a definite commentary on the sentiment felt by most Aboriginal people regarding the gross imposition by the federal government on Aboriginal people in remote regions. Here we have a piece from the current suite, Black Swans, and this is, I guess, a bit of a flagship image, and it's celebrating the dream of having black ballerinas performing for the Australian Ballet. And this one is probably a central piece because it's titled Autonomous Dreaming, and it's giving that complete autonomy back to Aboriginal women in the freedom of expression, but also tapping into the tribal days and tribal origins. So the main feature of this piece, or the cryptic feature, is the clear painted spirit woman over here, spirit ballerina, coming off the top of the rocky outcrop there. In each of these Black Swan pieces, the landscape carries a rocky outcrop, which is the top end of the continent. So it's kind of hidden in there in the scrub. But there at the pointy part of the continent is the dreaming spirit figure there. These pieces are also important to acknowledge that there's a number of, I'll do that again.
Yeah, no worries.
These pieces are also important to acknowledge that there are a number of metaphors and layers that make up a template for my works at present, and that is of course the clouds, the flat-bottom clouds, the return of the flat-bottom clouds, which have always been a metaphor for government, being that false ceiling in the sky and the white puffiness of the shadow being cast upon the citizens on this continent by those cloud formations. About 2014, those clouds were given a rest, and I searched for something else to incorporate as a graphic element in the sky, and that's where the chemtrails came into play. And so on the odd occasion in this series and paintings of current, they will occur both in the painting. So as you see, the clouds and the chemtrails. And what I learned was that by experimenting with the configuration of the chemtrails, you could come up with a hashtag in the sky. And so they will often be featured in paintings where there aren't the clouds existent. This year, and this year only, the usual 7 bands in my paintings that represent the 7 sisters dreaming, an acknowledgement to the dominant dreaming across the continent, this year have become a different pattern. And so pretty much this suite only carries a fragmented version. So there's still 7 areas of blue in that sky, but they're kind of like a shattered glass pane. And that's an acknowledgement to the celebration of James Cook's arrival here, which was 250 years ago. And many people are celebrating that. So I wanted to acknowledge that as a pivotal signature influence in this suite of paintings, which will only be existent in this suite and the paintings created this year. Here we have a marvellous installation piece made up of this large canvas and the two brand new bronze pieces sitting up top there, sandstone plinths. This piece was painted for Manly Art Gallery last year for a group exhibition on Manly Dam. And so this piece here, Damnation, was created and commissioned by Manly Art Gallery, featuring a little garden ornament statue which I had acquired a couple of years prior, and he featured alongside his little sister in the original installation at Manly Art Gallery. To take it a step further and advance upon that, we set the task in actually casting those concrete garden statues, thus creating these bronze pieces, and which become a historic first in that these are most likely the first ever bronze statues of Aboriginal children, Jarjums, if you will. And I think it makes for a very tidy piece and what would look just incredible surrounding anybody's fountain in their garden in the southern regions of New South Wales. I'm holding here an edition of 7 black resin nickel dipped spears, and these original concept arrived in my head some time back when I actually found the original wooden spear at the Yuendamu Art Centre in the desert. It's more of an ornamental spear. As you can see, it's quite large. It's probably not used for throwing per se, but it has a beautiful symmetry about it. And the beautiful thing about the spear is the really broad head that's carved into the wood. And so I always imagined that this could be utilised in some way, and that's what I've done, and by stylising the PayPal logo into payback, which is a quirky comment on paying one back for an injustice served on them. It's a tribal law thing in most Aboriginal communities in remote regions, and where the perpetrator of a crime or an offence is taken out into an open area and a dozen spears are thrown at that person as a payback measure. So from that, we realised that since I had the mould already, I should embark on perhaps experimenting in creating a bronze version. And here is that bronze version. Once again, another quirky narrative here in my first large-scale bronze, and that is the use of the original silent cop, which is the traffic obstacle featured in most intersections throughout New South Wales and other capital cities as well. And that was designed to drive around that and not cut the corners of an intersection. And so I found one of these on eBay, obviously now become collectible, and set the task in moulding this piece, moulding the payback spear into bronze, and then fitting that spear to this, and that becomes a really beautiful colloquial metaphor, a satirical metaphor. The suite, titled Hung Out to Fry, originally existed of several hand-painted resin flying foxes, and in the Darug language of Western Sydney, we call the bat Wurmbai. So each of these guys has the W on his back, which makes him into a superhero, and the superhero that I always imagined after growing up watching Batman. And the bronze edition was made just to further memorialise the beauty of that bat. And originally these were cast off a fruit bat that had zapped himself the night before and ended up in the gutter, and I found him fresh in the morning and thought, too beautiful creature to just leave to the ants. So I set the task in working with a fabulous mould maker in Marrickville, and we cast the bat, and then were able to not only produce the resin ones to become hand painted, the bronze, and then the 18 karat gold patina versions as well. So it's a beautiful suite acknowledging a dominant Darug totem of the men of Western Sydney. Curriculum Veto. This was created in 2008, and I was riding my bike through the back streets of Surrey Hills and found this 1980s flip school desk sitting in a laneway ready for the council chuck out, and I saw the artwork immediately. So I threw it over my shoulders and rode it back to the studio and set to task on decorating this one here. Acquiring a spear from Bomali Aboriginal artists, where somebody had made a bunch of spears that had sat for a while, and I sought permission to use the spear and fitted this one through here, straight through the guts of the Motherland's logo. And it was a comment that had to be made, given that when we were in school in Western Sydney, and it was always seen as troublesome to keep the Aboriginal kids in class, and we always wondered why the Aboriginal kids were going AWOL. And there was a spiritual awakening for me where it was explained to me by an elder, well, we're forced to sit in a overheated demountable learning algebra and not learning our tribal law. So I imagine the grandfather walking into that classroom and just throwing that spear straight through the desk, taking by the hand the little child and walking back into the bush, and embarking on a tribal practice that for a long time has been refuted.